Genetically
by
modified.
Drew.
I like his haircut. Looks pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Convince someone that God exists. You're probably overwhelmed with the amount of information and approaches other theists recommend. You need a starting point. As an atheist myself, I've become pretty familiar with the popular arguments for God's existence, both because my theist viewers send them to me literally every day in comments, emails, all that. Thanks, guys. And because it's studying arguments.
Hey, pause it right now. I just want to make a point immediately.
That will illustrate.
Did you hear the sources that he listed for getting these arguments? YouTube comments and emails. This is literally something that Elephant Philosophy says in his review of this. So yes, I got this from Elephant Philosophy. If God real, why am I fat? Alright, so that's just a point I wanted to make. Look at where he's getting these arguments from. He's literally getting them from YouTube comments. He's not getting them from an academic journal.
Well, see, he doesn't mean an academic journal. Academic, not epidemic.
Yeah, bro. My teenage YouTube comments are good enough for these sources. Why read an academic defense of a view that I'm going to try to critique?
All right, let's get on with this because, okay.
It's a pretty long video.
Each of the more popular arguments for God's existence. Although I've found all arguments for God I've encountered so far to be logically or evidentially problematic in some way, I do see some arguments as better than others. Here, I'll rank popular arguments by their stats in 4 areas. 1, intuitiveness, the ease at which the mind comprehends or even instinctively believes the concepts at play. 2, fallacy aversion, the extent to which it avoids utilizing logical fallacies and or hides them well within its premises. 3, communicability, the ease at which the argument is communicated to others and or its ability to capture attention when communicated. Finally, 4, refutation resistance, the extent to which an argument presents a challenge to refute, whether by means of complexity, emotiveness, or high-level rhetoric. I'll briefly cover 6 arguments, 1 in each tier. For those unfamiliar with this tier system, F tier is least powerful, while S tier is most. There's obviously a lot of subjectivity at play here, so feel free to create and explain your own ranking in the comments. In F tier, we have quite possibly the most popular argument on this list, at least when it comes to my comment section, Pascal's wager. The argument goes, if someone believes in God and God doesn't exist, a person suffers only a finite loss in death. But if he does exist, they enjoy an infinite gain.
I'm back.
Meanwhile, if a
What happened?
person does not believe in God or act
He's getting into Pascal's wager.
Finite luxuries on earth, but stand to suffer infinitely in hell. Therefore, a rational person would seek to believe in God and live as if he exists. This is commonly put as a theist.
Pause this.
Pause it. Could you pause it? Hold on. Could you pause it? And could you go back? I want to see where he started because some girl sent me a video and I was watching.
You literally got to the worst. You literally jumped in right where it started.
Yeah,
can you please go back a little bit because I really want to make sure that I don't misrepresent his views when I talk about them. Okay?
Yeah.
Finally, 4, refutation resistance, the extent to which an argument presents a challenge to refute, whether by means of complexity, emotiveness, or high-level rhetoric. I'll briefly cover 6 arguments, 1 in each tier. For those unfamiliar with this tier system, F tier is least powerful, while S tier is most. There's obviously a lot of subjectivity at play here, so feel free to create and explain your own ranking. In F tier, we have quite possibly the most popular argument on this list, at least when it comes to my comment section, Pascal's wager. The argument goes, if someone believes in God and God doesn't exist, a person suffers a finite loss in death. But if he does exist, they enjoy an infinite gain in heaven. Meanwhile, if a person does not believe in God or act as if God exists, they stand to gain finite luxuries on earth, but stand to suffer infinitely in hell. Therefore, a rational person would seek to believe in God and live as if he exists. This is commonly put as a theist proclaiming to an atheist, if I'm wrong, I lose nothing, but if you're wrong, you lose everything. This argument commits a black and white fallacy, asserting that only 2 alternatives exist,
Turn this
while other possibilities, in fact,
video. Please pause the video. Okay. Yeah, this is a mischaracterization of Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager states that it is that if your epistemic certainty in God not existing and or in naturalism non-Christianity, right? The idea that Christianity is not true, and Christianity being true, if there's an equal amount of confidence that you have in either proposition, if Christianity is not true, Christianity is true, then it is rational to believe and act as though Christianity exists if you have an equal certainty. Because you have an infinite amount of gain if Christianity is true, and an infinite amount of loss if Christianity is true and you don't believe, right? But Pascal's wager assumes, it has the premise within it, that Christianity is 50, that your certainty of Christianity being true is 50-50, right? All it says is that it is rational to believe that Christianity is true if your confidence in it is as equal as your confidence that it is not true, right? Only if you have an equal certainty in both propositions being true. I love how nerdy it is, like to make like a video game comparison about like stats and stuff. That just is that's very funny to me. And that's pretty much.
See, The Simpsons are the answer to all of the world's problems.
I already explained why he misrepresented the argument. And I was like, oh, what if you believe in the wrong religion? Well, Pascal's wager only says that if you're most confident Christianity being true compared to all religions, and then it's equal to Christianity not being true, right? If another religion is true, then you should choose Christianity. That's all it says. Never says that you should believe in Christianity just because there's more to gain. It only says like you should believe in Christianity because there's more to gain, and there's an equal probability of you getting that infinite amount of riches and that infinite amount of suffering if you choose. Like there's an equal amount. So obviously we should choose the one that has the infinite amount of riches if there's an equal probabilistic evaluation of either. So yeah, he doesn't understand the argument. He misrepresented it, which is why his horrendous, erroneously misguided attempt at pointing out a fallacy in the argument's logical structure failed. And so once again, even though I took off on a 4-minute tangent on why my IQ is higher, I'm also the only one like actually explaining the video. So let's continue.
I can't wait till he gets to the ontological argument.
I will lose
In D tier, we have
my mind. Anyway,
Here it is.
there are several forms of this, so I'll address this first.
He picked the weakest one.
It goes like this. God is the greatest possible being that can be imagined. God exists as an idea in the mind. A being that exists both in reality and the mind is greater than one which only exists in the mind. If God only exists as a concept in our mind, then we can imagine something that is greater than a greatest possible being that does exist. We can't imagine something that is greater than the greatest possible being we can imagine. Therefore, God exists. Yeah, that one is...
Yeah, that one is. Shut up, you fucking nerd.
Listen,
Even
I
Bruno
find
Lau
it
wasn't that.
funny that he picks the worst version.
Well, he's also a popular YouTuber, right? So he's making popular level content. He's not going to go into playing his middle ontological argument. He's
In
back in
his,
the version,
in
right?
his,
Even though, Gabe, what are you going to say?
in his defense, he's getting this from YouTube comments.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, he hasn't said anything yet, and this is a decent rendition of Anselm's argument. So continue.
I'm going to be completely honest with you and say that I'm kind of surprised he put the ontological argument below the Kalam.
That's good. That's smart. He's correct. The ontological argument is a lot worse than the Kalam. Both are absolute garbage. Anybody who believes in this should be humiliated for believing something so radically stupid. But ontological argument is worse.
I guess album planting is stupid then.
Yes.
Muted.
Yeah, he is stupid.
I don't like his reformed epistemology, but keep
I
going.
like the reformed epistemology.
Come on, people. Jeez.
Please, you're not contributing anything to the video.
A greatest possible being exists somewhere. A necessary criteria for the highest possible greatness is existence. Therefore, a greatest possible being, God, exists. This argument commits the fallacy of begging the question, as its conclusion is already included within one of its premises. Its first premise says that a greatest possible being exists, and eventually concludes that a greatest possible being exists. It claims God exists after simply defining God as existent. The ontological argument...
Okay.
Oh my god.
So,
He's basically saying that we're defining God into existence. Pulling a T.
And not just that, but he's saying that we're just restating the first premise, but the first premise is basically God exists in our mind.
this is similar
Not
to the
that God exists in reality.
This is similar to the accusation that Plantinga's modal ontological argument commits the begging the question fallacy, when in reality the S5 modal logic concludes that possibility the possibility of necessity entails necessity and existing in the actual world rather than them actually being identical, right? There's a logical entailment rather than an actual identification going there, which is why the accusation that it commits the fallacy begging the question is inaccurate and should not be used. And next, next for me to talk about is that he makes a similar argument here that it commits the fallacy begging the question because it argues in the premises that it is possible that God exists, or no, excuse me, that God does exist, then it concludes the fact that he does exist. However, we're talking about two different kinds of existing here. We're talking about existing as a conception in the human intellect versus existing in the actual reality and how we cause potency in the world. And so it's obviously an equivocation on how we understand existing, and because of the fact that he does not distinguish between these two types of existing, which is pretty easy to do. I'm not sure if it's intentional or not. I don't want to make Cameron mistake. I don't want to make Cameron Bertuzzi's mistake of assigning motives to people that I disagree with, and I don't know if he's being intentionally dishonest or not. But there is an obvious equivocation on what it means to exist in the premises and conclusion of the argument, which makes his attempt to label this argument as begging the question as deeply misguided and logically incorrect. So that's all we have to say. Let's continue with the video.
Oh my, Chris, can you please slow down? Like,
no.
You just read through all of God's.
You look over here. I'm showing up.
Chapter. You just read through all of Alvin Plantinga's chapter on the ontological argument in 2.2 seconds.
Yeah, right. Logic and theism has been raising my IQ. Calm down, bench.
Ben Shapiro.
Somebody earlier put top 10 rappers. Eminem was too afraid of this.
What's bad is you listen to Eminem.
No, yeah, Josh went out and said he listened to Eminem. I'm like, yeah, I listened to too much, way too much Eminem. That's really ironic, actually. But yeah, so now that I have successfully refuted genetically modified skeptic, and my friends have absolutely nothing to add because I've covered anything with far more precision and eloquence than they possibly could imagine, let's continue with the video.
You're you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to say anything.
Change his name to nominalist.
Refutation resistance stat. It deceptively appears complex, giving the impression that its refutation would also need to be complex. It still does not hide its fallacies well, however, so it ultimately makes poor use of its confusability.
It doesn't hide them well because they don't exist.
It's rather unintuitive, and its wordiness makes it difficult to communicate to others. Because of this, it's most often used in its syllogistic form by apologists. Given that its only decent stat and ability ultimately backfire, making it difficult to use, Anselm's ontological argument only makes it to D tier. On to C tier, where we
What
find
about Plantingas and Gödel's and Leibniz's and...
You do understand that you have to have a very strong understanding of different orders of logic, all kinds of mathematical logic.
To understand Gödel's.
Second order logic, symbolic logic, modal logic, all of these different kinds of extremely sophisticated logics to even understand Gödel's ontological argument. Yeah. I don't think, because I don't think it's a bad thing that they didn't address Gödel's argument at all. I think that's perfectly fine, right? Because
yeah, but he's making it the entire ontological argument ranks D tier.
No, he specifically says Anselm's ontological argument. I'm not a big fan of genetically modified skeptic, but I think you guys are being a bit uncharitable.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay, yeah, Josh is spitting facts in the comments, as always. Except
Chris, as you said earlier, do you really think that he's going on a popular atheist level? He's not trying to order of logic and everything. All right, let's see what he has to say.
He's specifically reciting logic and theism.
Yeah, I have logic and theism literally right here. My brain, my IQ raises 50 points. After when that book
just from looking at it.
Chris, you do realize we've been going for 20 minutes and we have about 4 minutes of actual content.
Well, what if I told you that I did not care at all?
That would surprise me.
I believe you.
Anyway, let's continue and let me continue to carry the entire intellectual substance of the video as I have been doing this entire time.
You know what? Muted.
Unmuted. Continue with the video.
This argument is very popular among Christian
apologists,
as well as many theists with a more cursory knowledge of apologetics.
I actually think that should be F tier.
Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That's all of it. Other arguments are often used in conjunction with the Kalam in order to support the idea of a specific God, but still, the Kalam is well recognized as an argument for theism. Strangely enough, this supposed argument for God is not actually about any deity at all. Even if the entire argument was granted, it still wouldn't support theism. Further, even if granted,
Okay, so he makes the error here of
No, Chris,
the
Chris,
conclusion
let
must
me
be
say something.
contained. He makes the error here of assuming
Chris, Chris,
Chris, it's our turn.
in the actual argument, when in fact the theistic divine attributes are actually derived from conceptual analysis upon deriving what the cause
I will keep muting you. Chris, let me talk.
what the cause must be. We conclude that there are certain divine attributes that the cause must have, and therefore it must be God. This is upon further conceptual analysis, as I already said, upon the conclusion of the cause of the ultimate cause of the universe. Therefore, for him to argue that this doesn't actually get you to God, we make a mistake. Because as many of the proponents of the Kalam cosmological have argued, it is the conceptual analysis upon the conclusion of the argument and what it ontologically commits us to.
Slow down, Ben Shapiro.
In which we must accept and agree with that, in fact, God, as defined in the new classical models of God, is put forth and argued for by Plantinga and Craig, for examples, have believed in and argued. So, yeah, that's how it works. And he is wrong, as I've demonstrated. Okay, now I can continue with the video because I have successfully refuted and described his points eloquently, and I've steelmanned him to a perfect degree. And none of my colleagues can provide any nearly on the level that I have, so it's pointless to actually listen to them. So let's continue.
Okay. No,
He just went through everything I was going to say, but at like a 0.5 faster.
He's over here like going double speed.
He's over here on Godzilla speed. Oh wait, no. What's the faster one? Rap God speed. He's on Rap God speed.
No, I think he's like totally like he basically stated the Kalam in its most simple form, the one you look up on like Google, and then it's like, yeah, you can actually get it on Google. He looks it up on like Google. He's like, boom, it just proves the cause, man. No theism needed.
No, what he did was he went to Matt Dillahunty for help.
No, but
This is what happens when I'm not talking. This is what happens.
No one cares about you anymore, Chris.
This is why you need to listen to me, because I actually say smart stuff as well as being funny. JC is neither smart nor funny.
He's pretty funny.
You know what?
And he's pretty eloquent.
Eloquent. JC is eloquent.
Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about one of your blog posts that you made.
Chris, shut up. I will kick you. No.
Anyways, continue while he's muted.
No, but I think he basically takes the Google version and then goes, "Ha, it just proves the cause. No theism needed," and he doesn't actually look into the work. He doesn't actually look into the work of like William Lane Craig.
He also Googled the #1 infection.
Like you can just, I mean, it does. It's kind of hard for me to explain what I'm trying to say.
You're gonna be so mad at the next argument, though, and so is Chris. Refuting genetically modified skeptic with guns.
We would be demonetized.
Alright, unmute Chris.
I didn't mute him.
Alright, we'll keep going.
It wouldn't establish that the universe's cause was itself uncaused. The Kalam, if true, would only establish that the universe had a cause, but would say nothing at all about the nature of the cause. Proponents of this argument will often state that the Big Bang was the beginning of all space, time, and matter, and thus the beginning of causation. Therefore, the cause of the Big Bang must have been uncaused itself. This misunderstands the Big Bang, though. See, we don't exactly understand the Big Bang to be the beginning of all that is. It isn't the moment where something came from nothing, as some mistakenly assert. we've traced the expansion of the universe backward, and the Big Bang is simply the point where our understanding of the laws of physics no longer makes sense, and we can't trace back any further. So, yeah, the Kalam cosmological argument fails to establish a first cause, much less any deity. It is rather.
Okay. On the cosmology and physics, I would agree with them to an extent. But at the same time, currently our best theory is the Big Bang. And if we take the Big Bang, you can make a fairly good case for the Kalam, right? So he would basically be saying, well, there's another explanation out there we don't know about yet. Or
What's
there may
happening?
be.
What's going on? What's going on? What's happening right now? What's going on?
We're talking about cosmology.
Oh, so like you're talking about stuff that you don't know shit about. Okay, let me.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so when we talk about the CCC model, as put forth by Roger Penrose, we must take into account theorems put
Goodbye.
Just mute.
forth by differential geometry. For example.
Mute.
Oh yeah, look at this. Like, pull up what Josh said. I swear the last time we talked to you, you said Big Bang cosmology.
No, I didn't. I said there's a lot of unknowns.
Also,
Like
not to
you
mention
said.
the fact that you confuse the special and general theories of relativity, and you confuse the Minkowski
Chris,
anticipation with like the relativity theory itself.
Chris, shut up.
Yeah, JC hasn't like said one word this entire time.
All he's done is just sat there and gotten humiliated.
Yeah, because you wouldn't let him talk.
I can't speak, Chris. Oh my goodness.
We're gonna have to do a separate resurrection video so that you can get some speaking time in.
No, okay, just to clarify, I said there's many unknowns, like he said. But at the same time, I said that I think we can reasonably assume that the Kalam has a fairly good probability of being true currently. But I don't think.
On our current, yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, there's just a ton of unknowns. So
I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
Okay. Well, we'll just continue. About the cosmology thing, even Krauss in his debate with Craig said the universe probably did begin to exist. And Stephen Hawking would have said the same thing. Of course, Roger Penrose would not. But he's really the only physicist that I know of that would actually agree with his interpretation of the data. Sean Carroll's got that wacko theorem that Aaron Wall completely destroyed. I don't know of any other physicists though. I mean, I think their last names are Goat and Lee, and they think that like time like curves around at the beginning, and so it's really like it's hard to explain. But like time like loops around at the beginning, and then it spews out, and there's multiple other Big Bangs. And then freaking what's his name? And then you got Quentin Smith over here with the universe is self-caused.
Yeah, that's weird though, because he said in his paper that I read, he argues that the universe could be caused through circular causation, which is circular. Like, it's very weird. So all the theories currently kind of fail, and even the Big Bang to some extent, but I would say the Big Bang makes the most sense.
I think it just doesn't like take into account like quantum gravity and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking about the beginning of the universe, the normal laws we have now broke down to a point where it wasn't you can't explain it using what we know about now. So like I wrote about this in the blog about how we have to explain it through certain theorems that or we have to explain it through a non-general relativity viewpoint, and we still don't know how to calculate that very well.
That all we can
And
do is
so,
assign little probabilities and stuff.
yeah, so there, like I said, there's many unknowns, but I think he's just kind of saying like, we need to. He needs to be careful about just saying, well, it fails because we don't know about the science.
Well, I think he was saying on our current model, it's not actually the beginning either, which he's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, if you went up to Alexander Lincoln and were like, "Yo, is the current understanding that the universe had a beginning?" He'd be like, "Yeah." He wouldn't be like, "No, the second law of thermodynamics, or no, first law."
Yeah, I
Which
mean,
this isn't, oddly enough, this is something that people throw out as an argument against God all the time, and then you tell them that like when the universe is younger, it doesn't actually apply because most of our physical understanding breaks down.
well, yeah, and I think you have also philosophical issues with like,
Like Zeno's paradoxes of time and stuff.
yeah. All right, so let's continue and see like the rest of his tier list.
Rather intuitive and easy to communicate, giving it an edge over the ontological argument. It also has greater fallacy aversion and refutation resistance than Pascal's wager, although that's not really saying much. The Kalam's
Oh
unique
my!
feature is its
He
easy
had to throw that comment in.
form. It isn't confusing or wordy, but it still sounds smart. With low level but not terrible stats or abilities, the Kalam cosmological argument lands in C tier.
Of course.
People are not asking the right questions.
And
They're not asking the right questions because they kind of think they already know.
Okay, now we're getting to the arguments with some fight in them. In B tier, we have the argument most often used to justify bigotry toward non-believers, the moral argument or argument.
oh no,
There's
No one walks around going like, "You atheists are immoral."
well, there probably are some, but no, like he
Yeah,
started
like I know
off
the
with the
meaning of
worst
life.
possible introduction. Just like, yep, it's used to justify bigotry towards non-believers. No,
I mean,
that's not what
it
they're
is,
saying.
but I know a couple of people who use it that way. Like I know the meaning of life.
Right, but it's not. That's not
Like you won't see William Lane
academically.
Craig walk up and go like, "You atheists are immoral." Even
You
though I hate
atheists
this
are
argument.
immoral. I can shoot you. Like, no.
Frank Turk moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he started this off horribly, and then it just kind of went downhill. But let's actually see what he has to say.
There are several forms of this argument, but a common syllogistic form nowadays is this. If God does not exist, objective moral values don't exist. Objective moral values exist, therefore God exists. This argument's first premise is unsubstantiated. It doesn't demonstrate that the only way objective moral values can exist is if God exists. This is simply a non sequitur. Some who use this argument may define objective moral values as moral values declared by God, but that would make the argument state its conclusion within its second premise. That would commit the fallacy of begging the question. The argument would be circular reasoning. God exists because God ordained moral values exist because God exists, and so on. Some other moral arguments, such as C.S. Lewis' argument in Mere Christianity, state that moral law has not been shown to have a natural origin, so it must have come from a supernatural moral lawgiver. First of all, this is an argument from ignorance, not
I
knowing.
don't think C.S. Lewis said that.
Hmm.
I mean, I can't remember what he said in Mere Christianity, but I don't think it was anywhere along the lines of, "Well, you can't show it naturally, therefore God."
Yeah, C.S. Lewis was also much like very, very articulate when writing. Like he's not just gonna say that, and even if he did, he's probably gonna make it a fairly good point. Like he's not just gonna flat out say, "Oh yeah, we can't explain it through naturalism, therefore God."
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of agree with a lot of his criticisms. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think on atheism it couldn't exist. I just think it would be a proof fact if it did exist. Or I
Well,
think it would be unexplainable.
yeah, I don't know. Like the moral argument just seems to fail a ton.
Yeah, it just doesn't fit right. Like, this is why even the defense of it in the Blackwell, like towards the end of the Blackwell, like the beginning of the Blackwell is good, and then like the end of it is pretty, like it gets worse until you get to the resurrection thing. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with him here, but like the beginning just was horrible.
Yeah, and let's just keep going. We got two more arguments, and I don't even know how it's this long.
Second, evolution by natural selection is actually a pretty good explanation for why social species would behave according to practices which promote fairness, peace, and well-being among groups. This
Pause
argument
that.
is intuitive, communicable.
I don't agree with the argument, but that's not at all a refutation of it.
Yeah,
That's literally just kind of proving its point.
right. Like I don't see how that said anything.
That kind of
Because all
proves
you
its
would have to
point.
do is say, well, that happens because we have objective morality. Like,
Or just be like, okay, well, if that's true, then who really cares what I do? Like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not gonna actually like go and do that, but I mean, the person actually proposing that could literally just be like, you just proved my point.
yeah.
Because it wouldn't be objective then.
Yeah, let's see what he has to say about the other two, because we still have 9 minutes for two arguments. So let's see.
And fallacy averse to the Kalam cosmological argument. What sets this argument apart is its higher refutation resistance aided by its special ability, denigrate. While not always fully taken advantage of, the denigrate ability is used when this argument's user asserts that non-theists lack morals because they lack a belief in a god. This, to many, makes non-theists appear untrustworthy when they try to debunk the moral argument. After all, an amoral, godless liar probably would try to convince people that God doesn't dictate morality or doesn't even exist. That way, they can get away with all of their evil actions undisturbed. With mid-level stats and an occasionally effective special ability, the moral argument goes in B tier. I already know that my A and S tiers are going to be hotly contested, but I think my cases for these are pretty solid. In A tier, we have arguments from personal experience. I know, I'm sure plenty of you take issue with that, but please hear me out until the end. Arguments from personal experience aren't usually presented in syllogisms, but if they were, they'd probably go something like this. My personal experiences are reliable sources of information. I personally experienced, insert God claim here, therefore, the God claim is true. There are several issues with the first premise here. Personal experiences are not always reliable. One, personal experiences can contradict reality. There are hallucinations, manic states, meditative or trance states, psychoses, and more that can inform delusions. There's a wealth of scientific evidence that shows this to be true. Two, different people's personal experiences often contradict each other. Just ask all the Muslims, all the Christians, all the Hindus who have all had personal experiences in which a god confirms to them that following their specific religion is the only way. Three, and perhaps most importantly, a plethora of cognitive biases exist which influence perfectly sane.
So I'm very interested as to how he puts personal experience above like the ontological argument. Like it just seems super weird.
It should be F tier.
Yeah,
He put here's how this actually should have went. Should have went arguments from personal experience in F tier, and then D tier was the Kalam. C tier would be Pascal's wager. B tier would be the ontological argument. A tier would be what would be an A tier argument? Oh no. Hold up. Moral argument is C tier. Ontological is A tier, and then teleological is S tier. I'm guessing. I don't know about that, but it's definitely better than what he said.
yeah, and I'm just super confused as to how he puts personal experience above all the other ones. I mean,
Except
I
for the
might,
teleological.
yeah. I mean,
The-
it's very interesting. Now, could you go maybe a properly basic belief argument type of route? Yeah,
yes.
that probably works a lot better. But
Like the one that Alan Plantinga puts forward in knowledge and or not knowledge and Christian belief, but warranted Christian belief, like that kind.
yeah, it's very. I find that kind of interesting, but that's just me.
Healthy and honest people to misinterpret their mundane, naturalistic experiences all the time.
Isn't
Two
that a
fallacies are
Chris-
very
isn't
common
that a Sam Harris quote?
Yeah, I think so.
personal experience. The first is thinking that one thing caused another just because they happened in sequence. This is drawing false correlation or post hoc ergo propter hoc. The second is positing an unsubstantiated explanation for an occurrence just because you can't explain it otherwise. This is an argument from ignorance. So, with all these flaws in this argument, why do I put it in A tier? It has the absolute best intuitiveness and refutation resistant state out of any argument for God.
Oh,
We trust
How?
yes. I just refuted it way better than I did the other ones, but it has the most refutation resistance.
I'm confused. He like needs to flip his whole entire table upside down. Like, how? How
How
does it
does
have?
that have the most reputation resistance?
He needs to go for refutation resistance by going from like a fallacy and logical refutation, not because the believer says that you can't refute it. Like, this is very confusing. Like,
Yeah.
what?
By the way, if you want to see a really good funny refutation of this video, just go to Elephant Philosophy's channel.
Yeah.
That was a murder.
after all, the primary source we use to inform countless decisions on a day to day basis. This means that even well educated, intelligent people often trust their personal experiences over more reliable sources like scientific data all the time. If someone has a gripping personal experience related to God, they're probably going to believe it regardless of who they are. Personal experience is also incredibly hard to refute, given that it isn't possible to place oneself within another person's experience in order to point out any definite logical fallacies being made. On top of that, augmenting its refutation resistance, this argument may have the strongest special ability there is, attaching to identity. See, if you attempt to argue with the interpretation of someone's personal experience, they often take it as a personal attack as they associate that personal experience with their very identity as a person. Their personal defenses go up, rendering any further debate entirely useless. This argument has low fallacy aversion, but because of how convincing it is given its other stats, that doesn't really matter. Its real weakness is its lack of communicability. Personal testimonies do sway some, but for the most part, those who value personal experience aren't strongly convinced of things from hearing about other people's experiences. Many theistic groups have learned to compensate for this weakness, however, in creating environments which are conducive for personal experiences with God. Think prayer and fasting sessions, physically intense rituals, communal worship, and group excursions. If you still doubt that this argument belongs in A tier, go ask a few theists why they believe. Then ask them if they would still believe if the reason they gave was not at play. If they say they'd still believe, repeat those questions until they say no or refuse to go any further. This is a street epistemology technique for figuring out why people believe what they do. My bet is that you land on personal experience that way the majority of the time.
No.
That's definitely not why most of the theists that I talk to believe.
Well, obviously, there's always a personal factor in it, right? And
Yeah, in my case, there is.
that's just human nature, is to have a personal factor or bias into what you believe. But I do not think that if you keep asking the same question over and over again, there's gonna be like, "Yep, I only believe theism because I want to," or personal experience. Like, you can have logical reasons and personal reasons that can coexist and not contradict each other and still be rational in your belief. All right, let's continue.
With extremely high intuitiveness stats, an overpowered special ability, and solid strategy to compensate for its weaknesses, arguments from personal experience earn a solid spot in A tier. Finally, we're up to S tier, where only the most effective arguments belong. At this tier, I'm going to place the teleological argument, specifically the argument from fine-tuning. It goes like this. Cosmology shows us that there are several physical constants that govern the universe as we know it. If any one of those were tweaked even the smallest bit, the universe as we know it would not exist. The constants as they stand form a proverbial Goldilocks zone for our existence. It's highly improbable that this would occur by chance without a fine-tuning creator, so it's more probable that a creator does exist and is responsible for this fine-tuning. While this seems to make sense at first, deeper inspection reveals this argument's simple flaws. First, it makes use of a false dichotomy, presenting pure chance and an intelligent creator as the only two possibilities.
Stop. Watch any William Craig presentation of it, and he enters physical necessity and chance and intentionality as all three of the factors that could account for this. So I hope that Drew isn't being. I'm not going to say he's being dishonest, but it's just ignorant.
Well, the argument for fine tuning would argue that you need some type of, kind of like the Kalam, you need some type of being in which has the will and the want to create an anthropic universe in which life can survive and everything. And so they would argue that, well, you could call that just like a personal cause. Most people would call it a deity or God or whatever. So he's, I think what he's doing here is he's really oversimplifying the argument to the point where he can just call out fallacies in it that aren't actually there because it's so oversimplified.
Hold up, I'm gonna pull up my Blackwell really quick and read the chapter. Robin Collins has this exact objection put up in there at some point. He discusses. He put pretty extensively actually the physical or the chance objection, which is why I like Collins so much, because he knows a lot of cosmology and can really kind of destroy the multiverse as an explanation for fine tuning. But that aside, so he discusses. He discusses physical necessity and chance. So all the discussions that I've read, no one just goes, "Oh, well, it's either due to chance or God." No one does that. Like, all of them either go chance, necessity, or God. They don't just go, "Hoop de doo, it's only chance or God." Like, nobody does that. Literally nobody. Literally just look up William Lane Craig, teleological argument. The first thing that he'll say is physical necessity, chance, or design. This is an Elephant Philosophy's video too. He literally pulls up a clip of William Lane Craig just going physical necessity, chance, or design. That's all you have to pull up, and I'm not going to call him dishonest, but it's really just ignorant of what people say.
Yeah, like I said, he's just like oversimplifying this so much that he can just call out random fallacies.
Yeah, and Drew, if you ever do watch this, I don't mean to make it sound like it's a personal attack. Like, I don't mean for it to sound that way.
Yeah. All right, let's see more of what he says.
He's got. I think this is all.
Yeah.
There could perhaps be some purely physical rule to the universe which demands that these constants be the way they are. Second, this is an argument from ignorance. Because the arguer doesn't know how such an unlikely thing could have possibly happened, they posit an unsubstantiated explanation.
What I want to point out here is that what they don't take into account is current data. right? We're going off of the current data we have. You can throw out random conspiracy theories like, well, the universe could have this one mechanism that requires it to have this set of anthropic constants that can only be in that way. But that's not backed up by what we know, right?
I'm not aware of what's his name. I'm not aware of. He debated. He's the really good atheist philosopher on YouTube. Chris likes him a lot. Not his name is Alex Malpass. I'm
Yeah.
not aware of what his critique is, but I think it's more along the lines of, I'm speculating here, but from what I've heard, it's that we don't understand fully what these constants would be. And I think, to be honest, the best critique I've heard is from Thinking Trady.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work. Trady's critique doesn't work on certain formulations.
Well, but again, I think what many online, not necessarily academic, but online atheists don't seem to get is when theists make these types of arguments, they're going off of what we currently know.
Yeah,
And
they're not going off of wild speculation like the responses would be.
where I find the issue is that online atheists want to always call out how the theists are just throwing out, as they say, unsubstantiated claims or unsubstantiated theories, right? That's exactly what they do in most of these circumstances. Because we're like, he even said it there, where he said, well, we don't know yet, but there could be something that governs the universe that necessarily makes it the constants have to be in a certain way. But again, that's not backed up currently.
Yeah,
So
Collins even I think Michio Kaku talks about this at some point in one of his videos I saw, but Collins talks about this too, and you know what he's famous. One of the things he's famous for is when people throw out the multiverse, he says, "Well, this multiverse generator would still need to be finely tuned." This is something that Swinburne deals with in his chapter on it, and this is something that Collins deals with. It's called the more fundamental law objection. I'm trying to find it here, but basically, it seems to me that, yeah, here it is. Yeah, his critique is actually kind of what you said.
yeah,
Is that all the candidates for this more fundamental law have so far been really bad. Like string theory for a multiverse is kind of bad because it doesn't deal with Boltzmann brain problems are still pretty big. And then Roger Penrose's objections would be very powerful against that. The biggest multiverse theory that one could throw up would be an inflationary one, where like there's other dimensions of time and space that we don't observe, and this is something like Paul Davies talks about that is possible. But then again, when you throw that out there, you're basically just throwing out the same thing that theists are throwing out. Yeah, I mean, when you throw that out, yeah, exactly. That's actually what this is why. What Josh just put. What we're asking is, which is it more likely under, theism or naturalism? Because being modally necessary doesn't mean it has no explanation. Yeah, I think even Proust, when he talks about the PSR, would say that modally necessary beings have an explanation of some type,
all right.
which would be themselves.
Finish the video.
A God instead of saying, I don't know. This argument has high balance stats. Its intuitiveness is second only to personal experience. Research within the field of cognitive psychology suggests that teleological thinking naturally occurs even in children. Humans naturally conclude that there is intent behind the function of just about everything, living, non living, inanimate, or not. This type of argument is so intuitive that most cultures around the world have come up with some form of it independently. It's also very communicable as it lends itself to colorful analogies like the watchmaker analogy, and it spawns stories that become religious dogma, aka creation myths. One of its special abilities results from its high communicability and decent refutation resistance. That ability is giving purpose. It gives its user a feeling of uniqueness, privilege status, or purpose. The user thinks that they were designed intently by an intelligent creator. This makes challenging the argument difficult, as any challenges may trigger the user's personal defenses. Those challenges will appear to the user as attacks on their personal sense of purpose, as assertions of hopeless nihilism, or both. This argument also has the ability to retreat to gaps in the knowledge of any who would try to refute it. If a teleological argument is used on the level of biology and evolution is invoked to refute it, it may retreat to the level of chemistry, then physics, then cosmology as a whole, always avoiding direct refutation. As long as there's something about the existence of the universe that we don't know, this argument will rest safely in that.
And
No, it won't.
as I just pointed out, that's exactly what they're doing too. Well, we don't know yet, so you can't really posit God. They're doing
Like
the exact
this
same
is
thing.
this is. I think Josh was kind of hinting at this too. We're not saying this is why I never use this argument alone by itself, because we're talking about two competing theories for the fundamental nature of reality: naturalism or theism. And if we just threw the teleological argument out by itself, of course it would be, in my view, it would be kind of weak. But normally I would use it in the context of other arguments and make theism's epistemic probability more probable, and that we would expect this more under theism than we would under naturalism.
Right. And going back to what he said here, they're doing the exact same thing, just a little bit reversed. They're saying, well, because we have gaps in our knowledge, we can't say it's God. And then they want to claim then that we're putting in God because they have gaps. Like, it's kind of hard to understand, but
Yeah,
they're pretty much doing the same thing. And so it kind of makes me mad because they don't see that they're doing the exact same thing.
yeah. I'm surprised he didn't do like throw out all the other objections that people throw out. Like, I'm surprised he didn't go into string theory. I really was surprised he wouldn't throw that out there, and I was really surprised that he didn't just go, "Well, we don't know that." Like this. This is what SA did. He said that, well, we don't know that there couldn't be other laws that could permit life. This is something that I have no clue why this has started to pop up lately, but people have just started going, well, we don't know that these laws couldn't permit life. And I'm like, yes, we do. We know that if there's no planets, then there's no life. And like if like this is something that Josh talked about. If the cosmological constant was set too large, then atoms would all be like light years apart. And when that happens, you can't have anything at all.
Well, and like I said, every time they bring up the well, we could have, or we might be able to, or there could be, it's always like, well, we don't yet, and so we're going off the best explanation.
Yeah,
And
that's what theists are doing, though. We're going off of what we do know, not what we don't know.
well, and what I also find interesting is that they want to bring up, well, we don't know that life could sprout from other conditions. They are somewhat correct, but at the same time,
Yeah,
it goes back to this thing where we're saying, based on current data, what is the
well,
best explanation based on what we know?
I'll say this. I'll give them this: some constant, sure. I mean, if the electron was a little bit bigger or smaller, sure, you could have some forms of life. Okay, but if the gravitational constant were set off to a certain degree, then you don't got planets, and the universe just crushes in on itself, and then if the electromagnetic force was set too weak or too strong, then stars wouldn't live for the time necessary for life to be successful. So you can say that for certain constants, like maybe Avogadro's number or things like that, but you can't say it for most of them. You can only say it for certain a select few.
Right, and like constants that wouldn't allow for the existence of our universe would most likely apply to every other universe.
Well,
Like, you would even apply to a multiverse. So, again, even if
yeah.
there was other universes, our universe could theoretically, probabilistically be fine tuned.
Once you throw up the multiverse, you really just kind of. This is why when Dawkins throws up the multiverse, like in his book, he talks about the anthropic principle, and he says that we can throw up the multiverse as an explanation. Like he talks about Lee Smolin's universe, which is really weird. But nobody agrees with Smolin's view on that. Hawking pretty much called it stupid. Um, but he makes a huge point about simplicity, and then he throws up the multiverse. Like you just threw up all this stuff about simplicity, and then you're gonna toss up the most unsimple thing you could ever throw up. Like an infinitely numbered amount of universes, causally unconnected, no relation to each other whatsoever, and yet they're going to explain our universe's orderliness.
Well, I think you could have a causally connected multiverse, but it'd be a
Yeah.
more Penrose multiverse.
Well, he doesn't believe in the multiverse, so he thinks it's kind of stupid.
His multiverse theorem is that there is an infinite the universe expands and collapses infinitely, so I would consider that a multiverse, quote unquote.
Yeah, but it's not like it's not actually an infinitely no amount of universes existing at the exact same moment. T. It's that
Or
they
you could go
exist
with
at
the,
different times.
or you could go with like the Kaku string theory, basically that there is an 11-dimensional space manifold in which our four-dimensional, three-dimensional universes come from, in which in
Yeah,
that case there would be somewhat
but
causally connected.
but then when you throw that up, you can literally use that to explain anything. It goes
Right.
on. Like this is something that Plantinga talks about in his book. What is it? Where the conflict really lies. He makes a Texas point, and he's like, I'm gonna try to get my Texas accent real quick. Uh, Imagine that we are at a card or at a poker game, and I get aces 6 times in a row or something, and then you look at me and you go, "Now, Tex, you done cheated," and then I go, "Well, hold on there, Mister." In this infinitely amount of universes, there are infinite possibilities, and we just happen to be in the right universe where I get aces all 6 times. I mean, you could do that to explain a lot of things by that reasoning. You still there? Hello? Uh, you still there? Oh, his mic messed up. There we go.
All right. No, I was just gonna say, to a certain extent, you would even have to explain the 11-dimensional space manifold.
Yeah,
Like,
that Kaku
and
even admits that there's no observable data supportive of his idea.
right, and even if that turned out to be true, you would still have to explain how this 11-dimensional space manifold creates fine-tuned universes, which would kind of admit that it itself is fine-tuned, and you it just gets very wild to the point where theism is a much, much, much simpler explanation.
The best multiverse to me is Alan Guth's,
That's true.
but I still don't like it. But back to that point you were just making. Collins makes this point too, where he says if I have an infinite, what does he call them? Basically, bread makers. I'm just going to call them that. I don't know what they're actually called. And some of them don't work. Or the factory that they're in works. I'm botching Collins' point. He has a video on it. Just look up Closer to Truth, Rob Collins, and it'll be one of those. But he makes a pretty good point that the multiverse is true. Basically, the fundamental laws that govern the ability for it to spew out finely tuned multiverses would still have to be finely tuned.
Yeah, and again, like, it's just probabilistically, you would almost you don't have to, but theism would be a much better answer.
Yeah, even like I don't think Trady uses the multiverse, and there's a lot of atheists who don't like using it because it's just not. It's just
Yeah,
not. It's just not simple at all. Trady's objection to me is actually the best that I've heard. Basically, that God has an infinite amount of possibilities to choose from, and if He chooses, so then the likelihood is equal.
Yeah, that one was pretty good, but at the same time,
But
I don't.
Collins' formulation, like, kind of sidesteps that.
It does.
Like Josh's formulation of it, which is a rendition
yeah.
of Collins' formulation of it, it kind of sidesteps that objection.
It does, and again, I don't know. I don't think that objection gets around fine tuning either. Like, that may just be me.
Yeah. It just kind of lowers the It just kind of shows that it's actually equally expected under naturalism and theism.
But then again,
the epistemic probability is the same.
yeah. But then again, you could make a case then that with, let's say, other theistic arguments, that theism is then more probable.
Yeah. Like, and the
Trady assumes that.
that's actually a pretty good response. That's also again though why I used to just run around all the time throwing up the fine tuning argument and being like, boom, theism proved. Like,
Yeah.
now I don't do that. Now I throw up I would use a multitude of arguments. I would use some rendition of the cosmological argument. This fine tuning argument, I might use the ontological argument depending on if I like it that day or not. And then throw up some case for the resurrection. And you can literally get to Christianity that quickly. But it's not that easy though. You have to really, really, really look through these things.
Go to, like, incarnation and then.
Yeah, I'd actually kind of go for the incarnation first. I think
It's,
I think you could make a case for Christianity without the resurrection case. You could just use the incarnation argument,
which I think is what Chris does.
which would, for those of you who don't know, it's basically we look at people throughout history. We know what we see what God would, we think what God would do. It would be to show Himself in some way, shape, or form, and then we look at the people throughout history who claim to have been God's messengers or God Himself, and we look at them to see what they are like, and Jesus fits the characteristics of God way better than anybody else would.
Yeah. So, being that we're not getting much activity, and we're done responding to that, I think we'll go ahead and end it. But thank you everyone for watching.